And we are live! Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. Well, now you can give your waves. Now they can see you. Hey! Fantastic. It is an honor and a privilege to have you all here in person and to have you here on Zoom as well. And to all of the -3 people that will be watching on Facebook and YouTube, it's great to have you guys tuning in as well. So a short word on Parshat Vayakhel. And to be honest, if you want to hear a long word on Parshat Vayakhel, then you can go and check out last night's Parsha Pearls session. First time I ever gave it. It went pretty okay. Right? Maybe David will disagree. But yeah, so a short word on this week's Parsha. Parshat Vayakhel, penultimate Sedra of the book of Exodus, and we are building the Mishkan. There you go. That's a very brief summary of this week's Parsha. We are getting the craftsmen together, we are getting the materials together, and we are going to be constructing the actual Mishkan. Maybe there is one short idea that I will share from the Parsha. Pardon me? Gold from the women. Copper from the women. Copper from the women. Very good, yeah. Copper from the women, which I'd love to talk to you about that, but Shira's written about it in the newsletter, so I don't want to steal her thunder. But one small idea, we can understand that if the Jewish people had accumulated lots of wealth from the Egyptians, we can understand why they would have so much gold. We can understand why they will have so much silver. We will understand why they have so much copper. We will understand why they have so many different types of fabrics and so many different types of colors and all the rest of the materials that they had to be able to build the different things in the Mishkan and to be able to make the uniforms for the Kohanim. But a major part of the Mishkan was the partitions, was the walls, which were made out of wood. So where are they getting the wood from? Trees. Where are they getting the trees from? Huh. They're walking through the desert. They're walking through the desert, and all of a sudden they have to have all of this cedar wood to be able to make the Mishkan from. So where's that coming from? Why would they have been schlepping out wood? Right? If you've only got a few minutes or whatever it is to escape from Egypt, and you've got to gather up whatever you can gather up, value-wise, you're best going for the gold first and prioritizing the wood, the cumbersome, heavy wood last, right? And yet we see that the Jews had a stockpile of cedar wood to be able to make the Mishkan. So the answer that's given is that many, many years beforehand, I'm gonna get this wrong now, aren't I? I think it was Jacob. Jacob went, but it might have been Abraham, went and planted cedar trees in the land of Egypt. Why did he plant cedar trees in the land of Egypt? Because he had a prophecy, he had some kind of divine message that these trees are going to be very, very important one day. And therefore, they should jolly well, I think it was Yaakov, they should jolly well make sure that there are cedar trees available. So I think it's an amazing idea here. The paving the way of future salvation. That is a very prominent theme from this particular source. You know, the trees will have had no benefit to anyone at the beginning of their time spent in Egypt. They didn't know how bad things were going to get. But they knew that at some point in the Jewish narrative, these trees are going to be needed for building the sanctuary, which is going to house the divine spirit. And so that's where the wood came from. It's quite a cool idea. They either carried the trees with them or they turned it into wood beforehand. I'm not sure because it doesn't get talked about until you've got the situation over here. Rita.
Why did we have to build the Mishkan? Was it that God said we have to build? Why do we need a Mishkan?
Why do we need a Mishkan? So the Mishkan was to be the center point of the Jewish camp. It was to be the place where sacrifices, which would be a major part of Jewish ritual and Jewish functionality, that was going to be the center point for all of it, right? And it leads ultimately to the final destination, which is the temple in Jerusalem. So
The cocktail, you mean? You talk about the cocktail.
the Beit HaMikdash, of which the kotel is the last remaining part. Yeah. Although fascinatingly, have any of you been on the kotel tours, the tunnel tours? Right, and the sudden realization that actually there's loads of the wall that's actually still intact, but you can only see a tiny fraction of it at the western wall. There's loads that go down, and there's loads that go across, and there's the whole southern wall as well. But yeah, so anyway, we digress. David.
I'll ask you a question I don't know the answer to, and it's just an observation. Every word in the Torah is supposed to have an important significance. We know that. Every word in the Torah has an important significance. We don't know. But I've observed just in reading it, nowhere does the Torah actually mention the words golden calf.
It's just what we call it, the Egel HaZahav.
That's what we call it. That's all we know about it.
Well, you should have mentioned that last week. We're not talking about it now.
What is the word molten in English?
Liquid metal.
Vayasehu Egel Masecha, a molten calf.
So by molten, do they mean the fact that it was cast, or are they saying it was continually molten?
I would imagine it means that they were going to shape a calf out of molten gold. Is that such a thing that's possible? I don't know how. I don't know.
That is quite a big thing
I don't know.
to do, melt it all down.
Well, it was miraculous, wasn't it? The must be a midrash that talks about how Aaron was trying to stifle the process again and again and again. He thought he would delay the whole process by telling them to go and get the gold from the women, right? Because they thought that, you know, if they go and ask the women for gold, the women are going to be like, "Are you serious? Stop this nonsense now. We're not making golden calves. We're not." But they didn't. They I think they literally went and yanked out women's jewelry to be able to do this. This is how like enthusiastic they were. Otherwise, the women would have put a stop to it. They said, "Right, enough nonsense, boys. Right, that's it." Because as we know, women are better than men. Anyway, so one second. So then what else happened? I think like he got this gold, and then apparently I think he like just threw it behind him into the fire, like just trying to like not enough already, like nonsense. But then apparently, you know, miracles, spells, incantations, don't really know the whole story, but apparently that it kind of just fashioned itself into the shape of a calf through stuff that I don't really understand. It's great. Have a look at the midrash, read it through, and tell me what you find, because I can't remember.
Why didn't they use wood? Why did they use wood? Could they not got like the pyramids and used the stone?
So this is everything that was used was specifically instructed and specifically commanded from God. So that there's actually, you know, on a deep level, every single component, every single material, every single part of the Mishkan has a reason, has an explanation, has a, you know, a specific relevance and symbolism for different things. But I couldn't find my notes on where any of that was written, so I don't remember any of it. Gary!
So was Michelle's question about the Mishkan or the golden calf?
No, I think it was about the Mishkan. Why did they use wood to build the Mishkan? Why not use stone or bricks? But yeah, it would have all been, oh my gosh, Richard Gorney. My dad was in your position just a moment ago, and now my dad is gone. And I was like, gosh, what's happened to my dad's background? Okay, let's go and delve into Parsha Pearls, people. So here we go. We're going to get it up on the screen. Have we got another question on the Parasha? Are you about to ask another question? Oh, sorry, Rita.
No, that's okay. The question was, how many years? you say they
No,
were
I don't have a
counting
fridge.
cedar wood, they were counting trees.
Yeah.
How many years gap have we got? When the
At least 210.
And Jacob planted the trees.
Yeah. It was 210 years that Jacob came down to Egypt before we got freed from slavery. So they should have had enough time to grow. Has it? Oh, yes. Oh, people have been helping themselves. Okay, let's go with Pirkei Avot. It's 12:15, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a very long Mishnah. I will be amazed if we actually complete this Mishnah in any way, shape, or form today. All right. So we're on chapter 6, Mishnah 6, right? 5, 6, 7, chapter 6, Mishnah 6. You'll know it because it's a really, really long one. So I might take later. Thank you very much, Joe.
5, 6, 7, chapter 6.
Yeah, you got the place?
Sorry, is it?
On the right penny.
What
Hashem
page
loves
is
you.
it?
Page 5, 6, 7, apparently.
What, in this green book?
Yep.
2/3 of the way down the penny.
Should be number 6, and it's a very, very long one. So we're not going to do a tremendous amount from the Hebrew per se. And we're also not necessarily going to get through the whole lot today. So we're going to try and break it down. So whereas normally I might try and encourage someone to read on behalf of the audience, maybe just indulge me and let me try and take us through this. Okay, so the Mishnah starts off as follows. Torah is even greater than priesthood or royalty. Gedola Torah yoter min hakahuna min hamalchut. So we may remember that there was a Mishnah. Oh, here comes Martin. We may remember that there was a Mishnah that said that there are 3 crowns that a person can get in their life. There's the crown of Torah, there's the crown of priesthood, of Kehuna, and there's the crown of Malchut. Does anyone remember this Mishnah that we did a bunch of weeks
And
ago?
the crown of a good name is,
Supersedes them all.
there's 4 crowns, Rabbi.
Yeah, well, exactly. So we've got 3 crowns: Torah, priesthood, and royalty. Okay, so the Mishnah here says, pardon me, Martin?
And a good name.
And a good name. Yes, all right, steady on. You've got the best name of all of us, Martin. So greater is learning Torah than the priesthood and then royalty. So the reason why those 3 things are mentioned is because they are the 3 crowns that we mentioned in a previous Mishnah. Right? For royalty is acquired by 30 stages and the priesthood by 24, but the Torah by 48 things. Right? And for those of you who are looking for a quick fix, it's going to list all 48 of these different virtues, of these different qualities. Okay? So the rest of that Mishnah is those 48 virtues. So let me explain just the first few lines that we've said so far. Then we'll get into the actual 48 virtues, okay? Because otherwise we'll probably just confuse ourselves. So one of the key points that we want to take home from this is that monarchy, right, and priesthood are inherited. You are born into the Davidic line, or you are born into the priestly line, right, descended from Aaron, the original Kohen. Torah is earned, right? The way that we acquire Torah, the way that we accumulate Torah wisdom, the way that we build. Oh, welcome. Lovely to see you. But the way in which we develop a Torah mindset, the way that we develop our outlook on life, that comes through time. That comes through effort. That comes through investment. And what our Mishnah is telling us is that there are 48 key traits, key virtues, key attitudes that you should want to have in place to be able to develop your Torah understanding in an effective way. As opposed to the other two categories, where just by being born into those particular family trees, you get these particular benefits, right? So the accumulation of Torah wisdom and the effect that that has on an individual, that comes through effort, it comes through investment, it comes through patience, right? So before we get to those 48 virtues, before we get to those 48 qualifications, let's just talk a little bit about the other ones, okay? So priesthood, number one. When we say that it comes with, let's start with royalty, right? Monarchy, which comes with 30 perks, 30 benefits, 30 side effects. So they don't get listed in the Mishnah, but broadly speaking, what we're talking about is the halacha that a king cannot be a judge, a king cannot stand trial, you can't testify against a king can't testify against you, they can't be a witness, they also are limited with the type of relationships that they can have. They can't do particular types of marital processes like chalitza and yibum. We don't need to get into the detail too much, but there's a biblical law that if a couple were married and the husband died not having had children, right, then the halacha says that the sibling, the brother of that guy, can go ahead and marry his wife, right, which is called yibum. Okay. Which is called yibum. And if they choose not to pursue a relationship, then to part ways is called chalitza. So these don't apply to a king. And that's not the only thing that doesn't apply to a king, but if he marries a woman and then he dies, no one else is allowed to marry her, right? She's off limits after his passing, right? So, and then there's other things as well. He's not allowed to acquire too much wealth. He's not allowed to have too many horses. He's got a commandment to write a Torah scroll. The Torah scroll has to go with him everywhere, even if it's out to battle. So there's 30 perks, halachot, mitzvot that apply to a king.
But where did you get that? What you just said, if it's not in there.
It's mentioned in the commentaries. In the different
Commentary.
texts, in the different texts that talk about it. That's right. So it's not mentioned in the Mishnah explicitly.
I'm just saying, a bit light-hearted. There's a 3 crowns pub up at the top, and I wonder if that's from the Bible.
For sure.
3 crowns.
It must be. Surely.
So while you're drinking your beer, you can be.
They used to come to my shir many years ago, and
We had a quiz there, do you remember? Diversity time. We had a quiz there, do you remember?
I've heard, yeah, that's right. Welcome. So that is the 30 perks, the 30 different rules, restrictions, whatever you want to call it, that apply to a king. In relation to the priesthood, right? So it tells us that it's got these 24 perks, 24 gifts. So we're talking about the different sacrifices, the different pieces that they get, the portions that they get. So in addition to all of the different portions that they get from a sacrifice that's brought to the temple, they also have bikurim. They get dibs on the first fruits if someone grows fruit trees. They get dibs on teruma. They get dibs on the hides of animal. Everyone understands what I mean when I say they get dibs, right? They get first choice. Yeah. They get first dibs. I'm going to stick with dibs. They get first dibs. We've actually got a priest in the room with us. So they get first dibs on challah, right? If someone was to make a certain quantity of dough, then a portion of that gets given to a kohen. And that's why when we do like the challah bakes and we have this moment where we take the that's what it's all about. they get dibs on any wool that is shorn from a sheep. That the first bit of that goes to the Kohen. We're on page 567, chapter 6, Mishnah 6. One thing we spoke about recently, and I never knew this. But halachically, a Kohen, anytime an animal is sacrificed, even nowadays, the Kohen is still entitled to the It's the right front leg, the jaw, and the maw. Can't remember where the maw is, but actually, those things are still supposed to be given to Kohanim even today. No, not talking about sacrifices. Any meat, any animal that's sacrificed even today, there's still supposed to be pieces that are given to Kohanim. Any kosher meat, any cow, any sheep, any goat that would get slaughtered even today, shchita, parts of that are supposed to go to the Kohen. And I didn't know that until we did this in Pirkei Avot a few weeks ago. Pardon me? For free? Right? But there's apparently all kinds of loopholes to get around it. But I didn't know this. It's still in play today. That we don't realize. I'll come back to you in a second, Martin. We don't realize this, but our friend over here, our resident in-house priest, we're supposed to give him so much respect. He's supposed to have, that's why he gets called up first to the Torah. We're supposed to give him first rights over everything. We should, if we'd have known you were going to be here, we should have said we shouldn't start the sandwiches until you'd arrived.
My wife reminded me about today, and I always keep forgetting, so I thought I'd call it.
Well, it's lovely. It's wonderful. Let's go to Martin on line one. Martin was trying to chime in first. We're going to go. Yeah. Second best. Next, Martin. That's right. Yes.
He can go into the butcher, he can go in, just try it, just take a leg of lamb, or take the collar out of flaxen stock.
Just walks in there, Philip. Just walks in. It's the mouth. Do we tend to eat that often nowadays? Oh, tongue. Oh, maybe they'll get the tongue. Oh, that's not. I like a nice bit of tongue. The front right leg and the jaw.
The jaw.
And the front right leg. Didn't know that until a few weeks ago. Anyway. And the front leg. Yeah. But we're not really doing the slaughtering, so it's all dealt with by what's it called? The board of Shechita. Maybe if there's anybody on here who's part of the London Board of Shechita, maybe they can tell us how they get around it nowadays. Anyway, so but by the way, Dad, I should point out you often like to send me private messages on Zoom, but everyone will be able to see them on the TV. So send me a text. So what else do they get? They get Pidyon Haben. Yeah, anytime that a pleb like me would have a firstborn son, so there's the redemption after 30 days, the money of which goes to a Kohen, and different other agricultural laws that apply. So when we say that the 24 qualities, the 24 perks, the 24 gifts that go to Kohanim, that's what we're referring to, unless you are the Chida. Rav Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who's actually Lee Cass's ancestor. So the Chida, who was a Sephardi rabbi, says that actually what we're talking about with these 24 expectations is things like the requirements for a Kohen to conduct himself with holiness and to remain tahor, to remain pure, and to wear linen clothing and to have haircuts every 30 days, or if you were the Kohen Gadol, you'd have a haircut every 7 days, and they can't come near dead bodies, and they can't, shave off their hair completely, and they can't shave off their beards, and they can't cut their flesh, and there's limits to who they can marry. So all of these different things that are unique to Kohanim, they number 24. It's a good thing that at the end of Seder night we don't go all the way to number 24, right? You know, who knows 24? I know 24. 24 are the particular qualities that are unique to the Kohanim, and 23 and who had their hand up? Peter?
Who ranks higher than in the hierarchy? Is it the priest or the king?
Who ranks higher? Well, you'd probably have to go king on that one, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you?
Well, the king is not anything to do with the religion. He's rather a state, isn't it? It's all a state position.
Well, he's in a way installed with divine blessing. I don't know. It's a good question. Why do you have to have rankings for everything, Peter? Why, you know?
Why not?
We're all equal. It's just that some people are more equal than others.
We are Levites.
The king is not a holy person.
He should be.
We had priests,
He should
we
be.
had kings.
Pardon?
We had priests.
We did.
before We had kings.
We did.
Rabbi, who goes
But
first?
priests, we don't put them up in fancy palaces, and they're not. You know, a king is entitled to take land and seize things whenever he wants. So
Priests-
entitled, but they weren't.
priests are more spiritual.
Yeah, everyone's got their own unique functions. Just treat everyone nicely, Peter. Why you got to make it a list? Why just treat everyone nicely?
King might give you a present. You don't know.
But it goes, like, for instance, I'm a daughter of a Cohen, but it stops with me because,
Right, goes through the father.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
my mother was Cohen as well.
Spiritual.
Mine
Yeah.
wasn't. Mine isn't. I'm just a regular Israelite.
Rabbi, who goes first? A Cohen or a chief rabbi or a Kohen?
So even an ignorant Kohen would go before a saintly rabbi who is an Israelite, chief rabbi.
And you said
Yeah.
that before. You mean, can be called that?
To be called up to the Torah, or to ask to be lead the benching, whatever it might be. So yeah, it would.
When Jonathan Sachs was in shul, that he didn't get called up first.
No.
He wouldn't. I remember in Edgware when Rabbi Lister was inducted, I was chairman of the shul at the time.
Ooh, psst.
So I go up onto the Iron Kodesh and Rabbi Sachs was there. And I gave Rabbi Lister the bracha of Kohanim.
Oh wow!
I'm not sure if I took it away from Rabbi Sachs at the time.
No, it's your blessing. It's your blessing.
He didn't give me a good look.
Okie dokie. So
Why haven't we got a Cohen Gadol now then?
we don't have a temple now. So,
Okay.
but if you want to meet a super holy Kohen, there's a guy in Jerusalem called Rav Yaakov Katz, and the head of my yeshiva always used to say, you know, when we get the Beis Hamikdash in his lifetime, he for sure would just walk in as the Kohen Gadol. The guy's a phenomenal, incredibly great person. So, and he's got a really, really nice beard as well. So, you know, he's the whole package. All right. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about our perks of royalty. We've talked about our perks of priesthood, but the Mishnah told us greater is learning Torah, because by becoming an accomplished Torah-focused individual, you will actually be blessed in 48 different ways. You will have accrued 48 different character traits, 48 different focuses, and so that's even better. That's better than being a person who's born into royalty or born into the priesthood, because you actually get these things for yourself. They become a part of who you are, and that's way better, says the Mishnah. So then it lists the 48 different ways. And as I said, we might not get through all of them now, but we'll take a look at them now, and then we'll kind of speak about what these different things are. Okay, so number one, says the Mishnah, is Talmud, is study. Do we go through them one by one, or do we try and flip through them quickly? Otherwise, I'm going to get tempted to explain what each of them are. But anyway, study, attentive listening, proper speech, an understanding heart, an intelligent awe, fear, humility, joy, attending to the sages, critical give and take with friends, fine argumentation with disciples, clear thinking, study of scripture, study of Mishnah, a minimum of sleep, a minimum of chatter, a minimum of pleasure, a minimum of frivolity, a minimum of preoccupation with worldly matters, long-suffering, generosity, faith in the sages, acceptance of suffering, who recognizes his place, I don't know if I'm reading that right, who rejoices in his portion, who makes offense about his words, who takes no credit for himself, who is loved, who loves God, who loves his fellow, who loves righteous ways, who loves reproof, who loves uprightness, who keeps himself far from honors, who does not let his heart become swelled on account of his learning, who does not delight in giving legal decisions, who shares in the bearing of a burden with his colleague, who judges with the scales weighted in his favor, who leads him on to truth, who leads him on to peace, who composes himself at study, who asks and answers, who listens to others and to himself, adds to his knowledge, who learns in order to teach, who learns in order to practice, who makes his teacher wiser, who is exact in what he has learnt, who says the thing in the name of him, of the one who said it. Thus you have learned, everyone who says a thing in the name of him who said it brings deliverance into the world, as it is said, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. So there you go. It's easy for us to look at this and say, oh, what does it mean by this one? And oh, what does it mean by that one? And oh, okay, so we're going to just go through them. All right? And we won't get through all of them necessarily today. But those are the 48 qualities that refine a person's character, that refine a person's essence, that refine a person's personality, and make us into individuals who are fitting to receive words of Torah. We've talked about this before, I think, but Torah is likened and compared to water, right? The Mayim Shel Torah, the water of Torah. Why is that a fitting analogy? Because water will only take shape if it's in a receptacle, if it's in a vessel. So if it's in a cup, then the water will take the shape of the cup. If it's in a bowl, the water will take the shape of the bowl. So what we're saying here is that there are 48 things that we can work on, that we can develop within ourselves. And that way, when the Torah is poured into us, it will settle into a good shape, into a good form, because we are making ourselves fit to accept the Torah that we receive. So that's our starting point. What's that?
So we are the vessel.
So we are the vessel. Torah is the content. Torah is the water. And when we start to expose ourselves to Torah, it's going to depend very much on our attitude. So if we don't have a good attitude towards the way that we learn Torah, then we can end up, taking very cynical approaches. We can end up treating it callously. We can disrespect it. We can disregard it. We can ignore it. There's all different ways in which we could end up treating Torah. But if we follow the 48 ways, then you'll see we treat it with respect, we treat it with admiration, with honor, with this, with that. So those are the 48 check boxes, so to speak, tick boxes. That if we are mentally preparing ourselves in this way, then we will receive Torah appropriately. So, with that in mind, and with like 5 minutes left, let's start.
Can you do the 48 in a lifetime? Probably not.
It's a journey. That's an excellent point. And it's an excellent question, and it's a journey, as with so many things. And you may notice, by the way, that a lot of these, if not all of these 48 ways, will have probably been covered at some point in the last 5.5 chapters of Pirkei Avot, and we'll probably see them. Be like, oh yeah, I remember that one. We said, you should do. Yeah.
Sorry, in 2007, and Gary will back me all this time, we were very fortunate to go to Israel on a trip organised by Rabbi and Rebbe's inspector.
Yeah.
And one of the highlights of the trip was going to H, where we were actually honoured by the late wonderful Mel Weinberg. Prior to him speaking to us, there was also a lovely man called Yontef Glaser. And he explained of the 635 commandments, whatever.
613, yeah.
13, and he said that unfortunately we cannot carry them all out because some are obviously not appropriate. And if we've taken bullocks to slaughter, well, depending on everyone's fact. But also, the late good man said, and when you hear a situation, he says, shrug your soul and going, what can I do? But it is, what can I do? And by reading what we read here, is literally, as you've got here, everything in moderation. And if you could try to live your life, I'm not speaking for anybody in here. Do as you like, I want to know. But I'm not here to preach, not to hurt anyone. But if you take the Avot, or what the word is here, to try and live a life of moderation and absorb what is said, then somehow you won't do everything, but you can only try.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Rabbi Weinberg, because if I had remembered, I would have brought the so I just like to keep the camera away from my screen. Otherwise Paul can just read my notes. So Rabbi Weinberg actually wrote a book which I was meant to bring in today, which is probably 200, 300 pages long, just on this Mishnah, just on the 48, just on the 48 ways and how.
Just to Purim then for
I'll
supposed to give gifts on Purim. Can this be your gift to us, please?
What? Buy everyone a copy of this book?
No. Let us sit and...
Yeah, I'll make sure to bring it in next time. I just completely forgot. Yeah, David, before we go to you, we're going to go to Paul because he was there first.
Thank you, Rabbi. I've listened really carefully to all of these, and I really don't have a problem with any of them. I understand, I can get it, not a problem. Except for one. There's always one, isn't there? There's always one. About halfway down it says, the acceptance of suffering. Now, I've always been taught, obviously wrongly, that Jews shouldn't accept suffering, or don't have to accept anything. And arguing with Hashem, or arguments for the sake of Hashem, are exactly what we should be doing. And in fact, that's what so many of, everyone from Moses onwards had a right go when they were being asked to do something they thought inappropriate. The acceptance of suffering is a pretty tough one to put down. All suffering, whatever it is, it's suffering. You have to be able to accept it without argument, without discussion with Hashem, without that relationship between you and Hashem coming up and saying, not keen on this one. Just a thought. If you'll indulge me, in preparation for today, I only got to number 13. So if you'll indulge me with a bit of your patience, we will get to it, and we will talk about it, and you're right, it's definitely one that needs to be thought about and discussed. So we'll get there. We will get there. Right.
David.
It's interesting that it makes a distinction between the three. It says kingship is acquired by, and Torah is acquired by, but priesthood is endowed with. And that's a big difference.
That's it. You're reading that in the wording, or you're reading that in, or you're just pointing it out.
In the English.
For royalty shall malchut niknate bishloshim ma'alot. We talked about kinyanim on Monday night. Royalty is acquired with 30 advantages. V'hakehuna niknate be'esrim v'arba. And priesthood is acquired with 24. V'hatorah niknate be'arba'im v'shmona.
It's different in the English. Yeah? It says priesthood.
So read me how it sounds in there.
It says kingship is acquired with 30 attainments. Priesthood is endowed with 30 gifts. In other words, it's saying they don't have a choice. Once you're a priest, these are the gifts that are endowed. You've already got these gifts imposed upon you. You don't have to acquire them. Whereas Torah, you have to acquire them.
Yes, that goes without question.
And kingship, you have. If you want to be a good king, you've got to acquire these traits.
But the 30 things that we were listing were things that are foisted upon a king.
Right.
It was things like who you can marry, who you can't marry, what you can.
It's saying with priesthood, you don't have to. You've got them naturally. Once you're a priest, you've got all these gifts naturally.
You can lose it, David, as well. If you divorce and want to remarry, you can't be called up as a Cohen to the Torah.
That's only if you marry someone that or if a Kohen was to marry someone who they weren't supposed to marry.
You marry a divorcee.
You don't lose it if you get divorced.
So, sorry, I meant if she's marrying someone who also has been divorced.
Is that right? Because Michael's a Cohen and you married me and I was divorced. We're not actually married in United Halakha. So he can't be called up.
Let's save it when we don't have millions of people watching.
Michael is a Cohen.
Yeah.
We are
No, it's just
Levites,
it's
so we
this
don't get
weekend
anything.
and I'm kind of thinking, oh.
What's
maybe
this weekend?
No. Watch that.
Well, we'll talk after. Anyway, so
Sorry about that.
let's have a look at some of these. Let's have a look at some of these things. So, number one, Talmud is quite relatively straightforward, as we've talked about in the past. That there is no substitute for actual study and actually reading and learning and exposing oneself to the texts of Torah and having the right teacher in place, as we've talked about on several occasions. So if one wants to acquire Torah, if one wants to have a good, firm grasp on Torah wisdom, then one needs to actually open the book. Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. The next one is Shmiat Ha'ozen, attentive listening. That's interesting because we might have heard this idea that listening and hearing are two very different concepts, right? It's very easy to hear things. It's much harder to listen, to actively listen, to carefully listen, to pay close attention. And so here as well, if one wants to actually gain anything from Torah study and from Torah learning and from these kinds of things, one needs to actually listen. There's a I don't know. To some people, it will be an amazing idea. To others, it will be a cute idea. To others, it will be a bit of a shticky idea. But I remember there was a rabbi once said that if you think about the word Shema, which we say is to hear, O Israel, but not just to hear, but to listen, to internalize. So he says, to be able to listen properly, first is shh, don't interrupt. Then it's to think about it, and then it's to actually understand and realize. So shema, to really listen well. So I said, to some of you it's going to blow your minds. To some of you it's going to be like, that's just stick. To David it's going to be like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What are we paying this guy for? But why is it always me? But there we go. So attentive, constructive, proactive listening, careful listening, and I guess philosophically as well, the ear is a very interesting organ because it's very difficult to control what you hear, isn't it? Right? If there's noise and a person is able to hear, then they will hear that noise. And so the ear is very much considered to be the entry point to one's consciousness. And so it is a lifetime training exercise to learn how to actually better late than never, Dennis. It is a lifelong training process to be able to actually learn how to listen and learn what to do with that information when you have heard it. Then number 3, arichat safatayim, the articulate speech, to be able to verbalize, what you learn, to be able to go over and replay what you have learnt, because that brings you to a deeper level of understanding. If you are able to repeat that which you have learnt, you are more likely to remember what you have learnt. And the Hebrew word here, arichat safatayim. So we call the code of Jewish law Shulchan Aruch, right? That it's orderly, it's organized, it's systemized. So to be able to re-articulate and to be able to verbalize in a clear way, in a concise way, in an orderly way, to have that attention to detail, that's a key part of what one needs, not just for any learning, but also for Torah study as well. It's all part and parcel of ensuring that these things can be faithfully and accurately replayed. So that is a number 3. Number 4, I'm just playing for time here, Paul, to make sure not to go beyond 13, by the way. Yeah. Binat halev, intuitive understanding. Lev is the heart. Bina is, we talked about it in the bigger picture. The process of bina is, pardon me? Superficially, we would translate it as understanding, but it means to be able to process what you are learning. So knowledge, when it comes our way, comes as da'at, as knowledge. Then we go through a digestive process in our brains, and that's bina. That's being able to process and start to comprehend and internalize the knowledge that we get. And then it finishes off as da'at. Chokhmah bina da'at. And then it finishes as da'at, which is the assumed, internalized value system and knowledge. But to be able to process, that is a fundamental part of any study, but in particular, a fundamental part of Torah study. Sichlut halev is the next one, number 5. Seichel, right? We know roughly what seichel is. So it's the ability to now start to see connections between the things that we've learned, to focus on the essence and to really drive into the depths of what we're learning. It's a level of mental competence. It's a level of intellectual maturity to be able to have a faithful analysis going on of what we learn. But now interesting, number 6 and number 7, Ema and Yira is more attitudinal, isn't it? The awe and reverence that one should have. when approaching Torah study. And this is interesting because we don't normally approach our general secular studies with awe and reverence. In fact, if you go into a classroom nowadays, the last thing that you will see between the students and the teachers is awe and reverence. And yet our mission is telling us that when studying Torah, one is supposed to approach the study of Torah with these two traits. This has some interesting ramifications when we compare Torah study to general study, right? If you drop a science textbook on the floor, what do? You pick it up. If you drop a chumash on the floor, you kiss it, right? This is all part of our attitude towards Torah study and towards important Jewish items.
I think it's well respect, isn't it? The kissing.
Is it? Is it, Rita? I don't know. And I think it's all part and parcel of our approach. We're actually told that we received the Torah at Mount Sinai with Ema and Yira, with fear and with reverence. We experienced those feelings by what we saw, and daily we're supposed to strive for those feelings. So it's very much, awe is very much, if something is awesome, if you're in the right setting, if you're in the right environment, it's going to have an effect on you. It's going to wash over you. But reverence is something that you really have to put a bit of effort into, to treat things with that respect, to treat things with that level of appreciation and of that significance. Practically, on a practical level, when we study different things, when we read about the sages, when we read about the rabbis, right, to approach those things from a reverential standpoint takes effort, because we can read a story about someone making a mistake and we can think of, if I was there, I'd have never done, what's he doing over here? Why would they go and worship the golden calf? If I lived then, I would never have worshipped the golden calf. Why did he go and say that thing to Bar Kamsa? If I'd have been there, I'd have never spoken in that way to that individual. Destroyed the whole Beis Hamikdash because of the way that he spoke to him. What an idiot! So there should be an awe and reverence. There should be a level of distance that we create between ourselves and the things that we're studying, because of the holiness and because of the level and the greatness that these people had. And if we don't appreciate that our forefathers were on a different level, if we don't appreciate that any of the people that we encounter in the written Torah and in the oral Torah, that they were on a different level to us, right? That's already the warning sign that we need to think about and develop that area for ourselves a bit more. I think we've talked about in the past the story about a rabbi who talked about King Manasseh, who led the nation astray with idol worship. And he said, okay, guys, today we're going to talk about our good old pal Manasseh, right? And that night he was visited by King Manasseh in a dream, who said to him, if you talk about me like I'm some kind of equal to you, mate, if you had lived in my time, you wouldn't have just walked patiently and respectfully to go and worship idols. The Talmud says you would have lifted up your robe and you would have legged it. You would have run to go and worship idols. I at least had the dignity to walk and approach it in a respectful way. You would have just beeline straight for it. So don't go telling me that we're mates, that we're on the same level over here. And the next day, the rabbi came back to his Torah class and he said, okay, guys, today we're going to talk about our esteemed teacher, King Manasseh. And he understood that message. So it's easy with our modern 2022 lenses, where we're so cultured and we're so refined and we're so educated and we're so advanced and we're so developed. It's easy to look back at these people and think they're so primitive. And what did they know already? But actually, this 6 and 7, awe and reverence, reminds us to have that little bit more respect, as Rita put it before. Then we come on to number 8, which is anava, modesty or humility, which we've said in the past is really like the bread and butter of what a person should strive to be. And over here, it's very much that the more you know you don't know. Yeah, the more, yeah. So the more you get exposed to, the more you realize just how deep the rabbit hole goes, and that takes a certain mindset to appreciate. It takes a certain mindset to not big yourself up and think that you are the master of it all, that you know everything. And again, Rita, as Rita has pointed out, it takes time to develop this anava, to develop this humility. But what we were saying before about Torah being compared to water, so water flows down. So if you want to get the water, you have to already position yourself lower than the material. You know, I think that's an interesting metaphor. You know, if we think, what could you teach me, Rabbi, that I don't already know? Yeah, one could argue that's not a very humble attitude. So,
don't we have, when you talk about the water, don't this whole part is just telling us to refine our nature and refine, because you are a vessel,
Mhm.
and if you are not pure enough to receive, you can't put good things, dirty things, you can't put it into good cleaning into a dirty vessel. And the word Kabbalah means to receive.
Yeah.
So unless your vessel is refined, and you're not going to be brilliant with this all the time, but you have to work on yourself your whole life.
Yeah.
To correct.
It's an analogy, a metaphor that we used a few weeks ago when I can't remember when, but we were saying if you pour water into a dirty vessel, the water's going to become dirty, right? So if we if we don't appreciate the risk that is out there of not approaching things with the right attitude, then the Torah that we learn and the Torah that we share could end up being very misleading, corrupt, wrong, incorrect, lead to the wrong conclusions. And especially someone who is responsible for deciding what law should be in any given situation. If they are corrupt on the inside, then whatever they come out with is going to be dangerous for people potentially. So one has to have a lot of things in place, really. In the same way that if you pour water into a bucket and there's a hole in the bucket, then the water's not going to stay in. So if we're not trying to patch up our holes and we're not trying to make ourselves good conduits and good receptacles, then where's it going to go? We've mentioned this before, by the way, but it's always actually worth seeing it for yourselves if you ever get hold of English translations of the introductions to different commentaries. So I'm pretty sure I've told you about this before because it often springs to my mind. But when you look at the introduction from some of our great commentaries, Maimonides, Nachmanides, whoever it is, every rabbi pretty much that's worth their weight in salt, if they've made it into the compendium of Torah commentaries, if you look at their introductions, you can understand a little bit about what humility is, right? Because nowadays we have to explain who we are and talk about all of our credentials and talk about all of our qualifications and why it's worth you reading my book, right? Oh, imagine if I had a book I could have plugged just then. And while we're on the subject, check out my new book, right? But society now emphasizes what are your credentials, what's your qualification, why should I trust you? And so people big themselves up and they say, well, I spent this number of years in this university and I got this degree and this PhD and this master's, you can rely on me. If you read the introductions to what these rabbis have to say, they all take the opposite approach. Who am I? Who am I? I am but a tiny little whatever in the sea or in the ocean of whatever, And I'm just sharing with you, things that I've received from my rabbis, and I'm sharing with you things that have come to me when I've thought about this and tried to organize it in my mind and systematize it. And people said, you should really publish this stuff. So okay, I'm publishing it. If it's of any help to you, then go right ahead and take it. But if I've made any mistakes, I take full responsibility for it. All of these different things that they say, I think are completely alien nowadays in the world where it's like very much like, you need to read my book. You want to change your life in 30 days? Read my book. I will tell you the secrets to enduring happiness. You just take out a subscription to my website and I will change your life. I guarantee it. So enough said. Yeah, Michelle.
I just noticed for some reason that when they talk about mind and, those two things, they use heart rather than rosh or head. Why don't they? Why don't they think about, the words for brain, mind? They use lev.
Anyone want to have a go at this one? Michelle was saying that in the Hebrew, what we're talking about, when you go back a couple of, do they actually itemize it in the Green Book? Is it number 1, 2, 3, 4? Is it just no? Okay.
It says lev twice.
So we had binat halev and sichlut halev, intuitive understanding and discernment, right? But it's using the word heart rather than the word mind. Yeah. So. Pardon me. It all comes from the heart. So when we talk about the real kind of chewing over digestive processes of thought, we always associate it with the heart, not just with the mind, because it's not just supposed to be a cerebral experience. It's supposed to be a part of us. It's supposed to be emotive. It's supposed to be, have a lot of feeling and a lot of, emphasis on those kinds of things, which is why I believe. Yeah. Don't trust your brains too much, guys. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to stop it there for today. We'll pick it up from number 9 next week and hopefully pick up the pace as well, because we're not going to want to do this. We're not going to want to spend 48 weeks. Did anyone have questions online? Well, we're going to end the recording and people can carry on schmoozing. To all those watching, Martin, wave to the camera. To all those watching on Facebook and on YouTube, we'll see you all again. Thank you so much for joining and take care for now.